Good evening, folks. Triple Crown here, coming to you from Vancouver, British Columbia. It is Monday evening. This is a continuation of the Global War 1939 solo game. And this is a round 6 summary. This round, more of a repositioning round. However, there was a big battle off of Cairo, a big naval battle. We'll get into that. And at the start of the round, the Germans actually finished taking Cairo. But that was on our previous video. The Americans spent everything in the Atlantic this round. They are able to load 7 more transports with 7 armor and 7 infantry to come across. The Canadians are able to bring across another armor and infantry. The Allies now currently have about 32 or 30, over 30 ground units, including a couple aircraft. And these aircraft that can hit. The Germans were only able to spend 3 in Paris. They bought a factory. The Italians brought over some tanks, so there's currently about 14 or 15 ground units. The Allies don't have enough to take it probably next turn because it's a 1-2 punch attack. Actually, they probably do. They could probably, maybe not. Currently, the British only have infantry and a couple armor. The Canadians did a ping pong action here with Marseille, and then the Italians took it, so that is going to hurt the German economy that they've lost the 3 IPP for Marseille. The British also they sent 1 infantry into Normandy. The Germans basically spending everything in Western Europe now. They bought some fast movers, 3 artillery, 3 mech, and 5 infantry because Western Germany is under threat. There's also a can opener here. There's only a single infantry in Marseille, so the Italians built a bunch of guys in Turin. So if a can opener does happen, it will stop the tanks from blitzing through and taking Turin. The German Navy played a little ping pong action here with the British for sea zone. Is that 24? They're currently not sure what they're going to do. There's still a little bit of a Canadian Navy up here, so they could head up here and try and convoy the... I think that's probably what they're going to do. They're probably going to head up here and try and convoy because they want to pull the Allied Navy away. And why? And that's because the Italian Navy, which is fairly big, it's got nothing else to do now in the Med, so it is probably going to head over here and probably try and take Gibraltar and get their navy out here to threaten the Americans and the Allies. So that's kind of an interesting twist. The Canadians and the Brazilians came back down here to southern Africa. They lost their entire, actually the British are slowly walking up. They've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 ground units and a fighter. That's all they have left in Africa. The Germans annexed 2 Italian transports this turn and reinforced. They brought and I forgot they could do this. They brought down 3 more infantry and dropped another one off into Syria with their veteran fighters to protect them just in case. Actually, there'd have to be another Italian transport there, which I'm going to do. So there's currently 4 ground units, 4 infantry and armor, and a Japanese fighter. Well, how did the Japanese fighter get there? Well, it was a very 50-50 sea battle here. There was 12 units versus 12 units, and the Japanese just had a little bit better dice. They just thought, why not? Let's get rid of this British fleet while we can. And the deciding factor was actually this veteran fighter here in Calcutta. I should have actually landed a couple more there because this fighter from this airbase could go 1, 2, 3, 4, and then land in Cairo. And if I'd had a couple more there, some more of the Japanese Navy would have survived. So it came down to there was 3 British transports left, and they defended a 1 versus this veteran fighter, and slowly it just picked them off. So there is no threat anywhere. The Japanese also came up here and took Iran. And they still have their transport fleet sitting off of Calcutta, which is safe for the moment. We'll get into that in a second. The Chinese backed out of Sichuan, and the Japanese, they've spent a lot of money on infantry, and they're slowly coming across China. So currently there's quite a bit of a herd here. They built a couple cavalry this turn, which they can build like infantry. And the Japanese are in Kashmir. They could go up into this Chinese territory here, or could go up into Uzbekistan, which they might do. And the British from Calcutta are making their way to, is that Stalingrad? Yes, to Stalingrad. So currently, the Germans did not have the money. They only purchased 4 ground units here this turn. So the battle of attrition for Moscow is being won. Currently on the doorstep of Moscow, the Germans have 55 units. They could hit Moscow with the next turn, and the Russians have 52. The American bomber flew there, but however, with the fortification and the fact that the Germans are punching lower, they do not have the wherewithal to take Moscow next turn. Now, this was another debate. The Italians have made their way with 2 units, an armor and a mech, and to reinforce the Germans, but it's not enough to can open anywhere. The Russians also built a fortification here in Karelia, and they built a couple more units there. So there's a little ping pong action here in Kharkov, where the Germans sent in 3 infantry, and then the Russians took it back with 6, and they lost 2, and they built another 3 in Stalingrad. Because what happens, folks, in this game, if the Germans or the Axis take Stalingrad and Leningrad, is that Italy and Sweden become pro-Axis, which would mean they would get this navy here and all these units, and this navy here and all these units once the Germans or the Italians land there. So that is a massive swing. Mind you, the Allies would get these meager small force in Portugal, which isn't nothing. They got a couple Portuguese units down here, but it's definitely, so the Russians have to protect Stalingrad, which now that the next term, the British should be there, so that is good news, and they could build a fortification. And also good news is the Americans sent over another 20 IPP and Lend-Lease. They rolled an 8, which is a 7 or less, only half of it would have gone. A 2, I think, is returned to the bank, and a 1 goes to the Germans. So that is a big swing. Currently, the Russians have 63 IPP to spend next turn with their Lend-Lease. I think the Germans have a pretty healthy economy. I think they've got 90 to spend next turn. Same with the Japanese. The Americans have 109. The British have 45 to spend next turn. The Chinese only have 5. And Anzac has 21. And the Canadians have 23. So the economies are still currently in the favor of the Allies, but the Axis have the advantage with their position. So they have the initiative still, in my opinion. Ping pong action here in northern China. The CCP took back Yunnan from the Chinese. And I'm going to add in another rule, and that is the CCP, because they are working with the Russians, they can go into Russian territories. So I'm going to add that house rule there, because the little ping pong action here in Amur, the Japanese sent 1 infantry in, and the Russians and CCP took it back with 1 infantry and an artillery, which was risky, but the Russians said stay out of Russia. So the Japanese sent their fleet down here, which is now bigger than the Anzac fleet down here, so they had to back off because they would be wiped out next turn, and it's bigger than the American fleet, and so they've now divided their navies, and they're just going to start building navies. So yes, but unless the Americans are going to start spending money here in the Pacific, the Japanese are about to overwhelm the Anzac, overwhelm the American Navy with just the sheer size of their navies, and finish gobbling up all of the money islands as they press the attack here into China. Next turn, they've got, there's nothing the Chinese can do. If they do a counterattack or make a last stand, I guess they could have gone up into Canaan next turn, but I think the goal for the Chinese was to threaten these guys from coming into here. They do not want that, so which the Japanese could, but they would get wiped out. But that would deplete the Chinese forces. So the Anzac built some 3 destroyers down here. They do have not a nothing navy, but the Japanese built a couple escort carriers and a regular carrier and a Yamato battleship last turn. So they are now able to spend on navy for the, sort of in a significant way, because they don't have to spend much in the way of ground forces anymore. All the ground forces they have are sort of already on the continent of China and making their way towards these guys over here. So that is the round summary. In conclusion, I just want to say, folks, your non-combat movements, I play different variants. I play BBR. Still, sometimes you forget about sea zones and air bases and naval bases and what can reach what, but you really need to pay attention on your non-coms, because having this veteran fighter here was the difference in wiping out this. I should have actually recorded that battle, but I got into it and it was sort of too late. But sometimes that position of a fighter and a non-com on the next round is the key difference between either winning your next battle on offense or on defense. So pay very, very close attention. I say non-coms are sometimes more important than the actual combat movement. So think of it in that context. Thank you for watching, folks, and stay tuned for round 7.